A trip to Sam the Record Man or A&M Records to purchase a cassette or a vinyl record. Albums typically cost $8 or $9, a considerable sum when one was earning $4 an hour at a part-time job at Dairy Queen. Singles were more affordable, $3 or $4, but even then, most could only afford one every couple of weeks. This scarcity fostered the art of the mixtape. Sunday nights were spent by the radio, fingers poised over the record button on the cassette player, waiting for the Canadian Top 40 countdown. The instant their desired song began, they would hit record, then stop the moment it ended, carefully attempting to avoid capturing the DJ's voice. Mixtapes were meticulously crafted for friends, with track lists painstakingly written out on the small paper inserts in their best handwriting. A friend might lend their copy of a Rush album, and an hour would be devoted to making a personal copy, the tape deck lights dancing in rhythm with the music. Trading tapes was a form of currency, a powerful medium for sharing what truly mattered. Music, however, was not solely a solitary experience enjoyed with headphones. It was inherently social. If someone possessed a boombox, a coveted item, despite its $100+ price tag, it would be brought to the park, and everyone would gather around it. Skating at the outdoor rink often involved someone's radio blasting Platinum Blonde or Honeymoon Suite. Music filled public spaces, drawing people together rather than isolating them behind earbuds. The culinary landscape of the 1,980 seconds was a universe unto itself. Mothers frequented Dominion, Steinberg, or Loblaws, navigating the aisles with metal carts that often boasted a single, squeaky wheel. They would purchase milk in those peculiar plastic pouches, commonly known as milk bags, an enduring Canadian quirk that often amused Americans. These bags were placed into a pitcher, and a corner was snipped off for pouring. For those who grew up in Ontario or Quebec, this was simply how milk was acquired. Bread came in paper bags from the bakery section, and meat was sourced from an actual butcher counter, where someone would meticulously wrap it in white paper and denote the price with a grease pencil. Dinner was almost universally a home-cooked affair. Mothers prepared pot roast, shepherd's pie, cabbage rolls, spaghetti with meat sauce from a jar, or chicken that had been roasting in the oven all afternoon. Fridays often meant fish sticks and frozen peas. Eating out was a rare and special occasion. When parents announced a trip to Swiss Chalet or Red Lobster, it signaled a significant event, a promotion, a stellar report card, or a birthday. Restaurants were not casual options for a random Wednesday when no one felt like cooking. That simply wasn't the custom. Fast food, of course, existed. McDonald's had been a fixture for decades. Post-hockey practice visits might entail a Happy Meal, presented in its iconic cardboard box with the golden arches, and a toy destined to break within 3 days. The fries, many insist, tasted superior back then, attributing it to a different kind of cooking oil. A&W still offered car service, where waitresses on roller skates would deliver orders to car windows on trays hooked onto the glass. Children would sit in the back seat, sipping root beer from frosted glass mugs, while their fathers read the newspaper. These were not hurried meals. Families would linger for an hour, for there was nowhere else pressing to be. And then there was Tim Hortons, which was just beginning its ascent to become the national institution it is today. In those years, it was primarily a donut shop, a reliable stop on road trips where fathers would grab a coffee and children would indulge in a Dutchie or a honey cruller. The donuts were baked fresh on site. One could watch them pass through the small machine that dropped them into the oil. The entire establishment smelled intoxicatingly of sugar and coffee. It was perfect, simple, and utterly unpretentious. Road trips were their own distinct form of adventure. Families typically drove large boat-like sedans, a Pontiac Parisienne, a Chevy Caprice, a Ford LTD, or perhaps a Plymouth Reliant K if budgets were tighter. These vehicles lacked airbags, anti-lock brakes, or backup cameras. Seatbelts were present, but in the early 80 seconds, many still did not wear them religiously. Children would sprawl across the back seat during long drives. In winter, fathers would step outside 20 minutes before departure to start the car, allowing it to warm up. Remote starters were unheard of. He would simply stand in the driveway in his parka as the engine rumbled and coughed in the biting cold. Summer road trips were legendary. Families would journey to cottage country Muskoka or the Kawathas, or venture out to the Maritimes to visit relatives seen only once a year. Fathers would confidently assert that a map was unnecessary. even as the same Esso station seemed to appear 3 times. Mothers would pack coolers filled with sandwiches and juice boxes. Siblings inevitably bickered in the back seat until a parent's threat to turn the car around momentarily restored peace. There were no screens, no tablets. Entertainment came from Archie comics or the license plate game, spotting every province. In moments of extreme boredom, they would count the kilometers to the next town. Time itself seemed to move differently in that backseat. Half an hour could feel like 3, but somehow they always reached their destination. Upon arrival at the cottage, campground, or aunt's house in New Brunswick, weeks were spent swimming in lakes so cold they bit at the skin, catching frogs by hand, roasting marshmallows over crackling fires, and sleeping in mildew-scented sleeping bags, waking to the haunting calls of loons across the water. Parents would occupy the porch with friends, playing cards and drinking beer from stubby bottles, while the children ran wild until darkness made play impossible. Nobody worried. Nobody hovered. Children would return, covered in dirt and bug bites, and mothers would simply instruct them to wash their hands before dinner. Yet, one event above all else defined the entire decade for Canadians. Expo 86. If one was Canadian in 1986, Expo was not merely an event. It was tangible proof that Canada mattered on a global stage. Vancouver hosted the world, and for 6 months, Canada felt like the very center of everything. People flocked from every corner of the country to witness it. Families might have driven across the Rockies or flown out for a long weekend, simply to wander through those vibrant pavilions, ride the monorail, and glimpse what the future might hold. One family remembered saving for 2 years to afford the trip, driving from Winnipeg to Vancouver in their station wagon, 5 people crammed inside with luggage strapped to the roof. When they finally walked through those gates, it felt like stepping into tomorrow. The pavilions were awe-inspiring. Canada Place, with its iconic white sails, the geodesic domes, the colossal Swatch watch sculpture. The entire experience exuded an optimism difficult to convey, a profound belief that the future would be bright, exciting, and that Canada would be an integral part of it. That pervasive optimism was woven into the very fabric of the 80 seconds. People genuinely believed that hard work would lead to improvement, that their children would inherit more opportunities than they themselves had, and that a decent life was attainable if one simply showed up and performed their job, and for many, this proved true. Graduates from high school could secure employment at the local plant, mill, or bank, earning enough to purchase a house and raise a family. A single income could comfortably support a household. Fathers might work for CN Rail or the city, while mothers remained home with the children, and the family would possess a car, a backyard, and 2 weeks at a campground every summer. This was considered normal. It was the implicit social contract. Houses were remarkably affordable, in a way that now seems almost fantastical. A starter home in the suburbs might cost $60,000 or $70,000. An individual earning $30,000 a year could secure a mortgage and realistically pay it off. Young couples would save diligently for a few years and purchase their first home before reaching the age of 30. The very notion that an entire generation might be permanently priced out of home ownership was inconceivable. Jobs, too, offered stability. One could dedicate 20 years to the same company and retire with a pension. The anxieties of side hustles or the gig economy were alien concepts. They clocked in, completed their work, and clocked out. Weekends were sacrosanct, reserved for personal time. Evenings belonged to family. Work remained at work. This clear boundary existed, and it was widely respected. Of course, the decade was not without its imperfections. No era ever is. The early 80 seconds brought significant struggles, with a recession hitting hard. Unemployment spiked, and mortgage interest rates soared to 18%, devastating many who had recently purchased homes. Factory towns hollowed out as plants closed their doors. Yet, even amidst these challenges, a profound sense endured that they would navigate it together, that communities would support one another, and largely, they did. What truly resonates when speaking with those who lived through the 1,980 seconds is the deep yearning for that lost feeling of community. It transcended merely knowing neighbors' names. It involved genuinely caring for them, watching out for their children, lending tools and having them returned, sharing coffee on each other's porches. Block parties were common, where everyone contributed food, and streets would be closed off, allowing children to ride bikes in joyful circles while adults conversed until dusk. This sense of community wasn't confined to individual streets. They knew the people at the corner store, the librarian, the crossing guard, their mail carrier. These were not strangers. They were interwoven into the fabric of daily life. They would exchange greetings, inquire about each other's day, and genuinely mean it. Everyday life possessed a richness, a texture derived from these small interactions, from being truly present within one's own neighborhood, rather than staring at a screen. Present. That is the word that resurfaces consistently. They were there. When conversing with someone, they offered their gaze, their undivided attention. Conversations unfolded without the constant interruption of someone checking their phone every 30 seconds. Meals were shared without devices cluttering the table. Children played without parents, perpetually filming every moment. Life simply unfolded, moment by moment, without the incessant need to document it, to share it, or to prove it's happening. And perhaps that is what people miss most of all. Not merely the specific details, though those hold their own significance. Not solely the more affordable houses, or the safer streets, or the undeniably better music, though all of those claims ring true. What people truly miss is the feeling of youth in a nation imbued with hope, the feeling of endless summer evenings, the feeling of riding a bicycle with no particular destination, no schedule, simply the open road, the feeling of a mother's call for dinner echoing across the neighborhood, the sheer delight of snow days when school was cancelled, the magic of Saturday morning cartoons, the simple, comforting feeling of knowing that tomorrow would, in all likelihood, be pretty good too. It wasn't a perfect decade. People recall the strikes, the pervasive Cold War anxiety, the very real fear of nuclear conflict that made films like The Day After feel terrifyingly prescient. They remember the growing concerns over holes in the ozone layer and the insidious threat of acid rain. Yet, beneath all these anxieties, there was an unwavering foundation of trust, community, and optimism that held everything together. When people express a longing for the 80 seconds, it is this feeling they truly yearn for. Not necessarily the past itself, but the profound sensation that life made sense, that people genuinely cared for one another, and that the future was a vista to anticipate with hope rather than to dread. The 1,980 seconds in Canada were more than just a decade. They were a feeling. A cherished chapter of life where things felt manageable, where neighbors felt like family, and where the greatest worry was simply making it home before the streetlights came on. It was a time when boredom spurred creation, when being disconnected was synonymous with freedom, and when community was not merely a buzzword, but the very essence of how life was lived.